Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday. Today we learn the seventh Perek of Nedarim. We're wrapping up this Masechta soon. Another few chapters, and then we're on to Nazir. Rich Hashem, next week we're starting Nazir. Today's Shir, Lili Nishmas, Aaron Nachum and Simcha Koyin, Yeshua Morcha B'Shev, Sabrach Sevish Ma'alei, B'Yam Moshe Ben Yosef, and Dov Ben Reb Shimon, the Shemer Shev and Aliyah. And first them for Yisrael, Baruch Aliyah, Racha Bas Pesazad, Racha Eliana Bas Yal Bracha, Avram Yitzchak Ben Risha, Chai Bas Bela, and for hold on, Shlomo Ben Rachel, who's having surgery today. First them to all the Cholim. Shefer Bracha Vatzlacha, the Tzvi Noach Ben Rachel Rachalea, Bracha Rachalea, and Ziva Bakara for Shmuel Dai Ben Hinda Miriam. Shefer Bracha Vatzlach and all their endeavors. And special shout out to our dear friends at the Imperial Advisory Group. If you need help with CFO stuff for your businesses, please reach out to them at imperialgrp.com. They are the sponsor for Seder Nashim. Here we go. Perek Zayin Mishnah Aleph. Hanodeh min hayorek muter b'deluin. Someone who makes a neder prohibiting himself from eating vegetables is mutter to eat gourds, the type of squash, because people typically use the term vegetables only to refer to vegetables that are eaten raw, whereas gourds are edible only when cooked. So like you say vegetables, you talk about carrots and cucumbers and such, which are eaten raw. But Rikiva Oser, Rikiva asks him to eat gourds because in his opinion, vegetables can include even vegetables that need to be cooked. It's not just the raw ones. Amr la Rabbi Akiva. The Chachamim said to Rabbi Akiva, "Hello, Amr Adam l'shluchel kach liyarek." If man says to his shliach, the messenger, buy vegetables for me, and the messenger goes to the market and finds only gourds, he won't buy them. Rather, he would return and say, I found only gourds. Should I buy them for you? Since you would not simply buy the gourds that are available, but would come back to get the sender's approval, it is clear that when people say vegetables, they do not include gourds. On the other hand, he responds to the Chacham and says, Kain Hadar, it's true that the messenger would indeed return to get the sender's approval about the gourds. However, that is to my opinion. Oh, Shema Omer Hu Lo Masasi Alakindis. Let's say that the messenger found only legumes, such as dried beans and peas. Kinius. Would he possibly return and say to the sender, I found only legumes? Should I buy them for you? Of course not. He will not even ask the sender about the beans because the term vegetables never refers to beans. Now, if gourds are not also called the vegetable, as you hold, why would he ask about the gourds? Rather, he must say that the gourds are included in the term vegetables. The kidneys, and legumes and beans are not included in the word vegetable. Therefore, a neder that mixes vegetables asers gourds as well. The aser b'pola mitzvilach, and he is aser to eat moist Egyptian beans, the fresh ones. But he's allowed to eat the dried ones because fresh Egyptian beans are commonly called vegetables, while dried ones are not. So even though regular beans and peas and legumes are not considered to be vegetables, as we just learned, but that does not include the fresh Egyptian beans, which are going to be discussed shortly. Mishnah Beis, Hanoder min hadagan aser b'pol mitzvi yavish. As we know, there are two types of words for grain. There are two words for grain. One is dagan, and one is teruah. So someone makes a neder, asking him from eating dagan. He's ushered to eat the dried Egyptian beans in addition to the regular grain. because these beans are also commonly called dagan. Um, Dagan generally refers to grain. It comes from the piles in which grains are stored after the harvest. According to Meir, dried Egyptian beans are also stored in this way, which that's why the word includes them as well. However, any type of food that is stored in piles is usher by the Ned, according to Meir, as we're going to learn soon. He mentions only dried Egyptian beans here to emphasize that although fresh Egyptian beans are called vegetables, dry ones are called dagan. Okay. This is according to Meir. Chachamim say, Eino aser ala b'chamishes amina. He asers them, he's as he's also only to eat the 5 species of grain, meaning wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. Meir says, someone who makes a neder answering himself from eating tfua is answering only the 5 species. However, someone who makes a neder prohibiting himself from eating dagan is usher to eat any type of food that is stored in piles. But he's but he's but he's allowed to eat the fruits of a tree and vegetables which are not stored in piles. Mishnah Gimel. Now we're going to talk about clothing. Someone who makes a neder that's asking himself from clothing is allowed to wear sackcloth, uriah, and chamila. Sackcloth refers to the material made from goat's hair. The uriah and chamila were thick, coarse materials that were used only as protection against rain. It's not enough for them to consider clothing, and therefore they are not included in the neder. Amar Konan Semer Allah. Someone said, wool that goes up on me is Konan to me. I mean that he asked himself to wear wool. He is allowed to cover himself with shearings of wool. Since he did not simply say wool, but added that goes up on me, which was how people referred to putting on clothing, he answered only wool and clothing and not wool itself. Pishtan Ola Elai. Similarly, if you say the flax that goes up on me is konam to me, Motel Liskasas Benitze Fishtan. He is permitted to cover himself with stalks of flax because he answered only clothing made from flax and not raw flax. Rabbi Yehuda says, if you know there, everything depends on the situation of the person making the neder. Yeah, the neder is interpreted according to his personal circumstances at the time of the neder. For example, if he was carrying a load of wool or linen and was perspiring from the weight of the load, and as a result, his body odor was strong and disturbing to him, Amar Konam Sema Ufishtim Olim Alai. And he said, wool and flax that go up on me are come to me. Mutalis Kasos, he is allowed to wear clothing made of these materials. But also the Hafshilachov. But he's usher to throw them behind himself, to carry them on his back, since he made the neder in reaction to the unpleasantness of carrying the wool and flax. We presume that he meant to usher only carrying them and not wearing clothing from these materials. Now we're going to talk about Nedarim regarding houses. I know them, Mr. Dalit. I know them in Habayis Mutabaliyah. Someone who makes the neder asking himself entering a bias, meaning a house, is allowed to enter the upper story. This is according to the mayor. According to the mayor, people use the word bias only in reference to the ground floor. The Chachamim say aliyah b'chal bias. The upper story is included in the word bias. Therefore, he's also from entering both stories. Like what's the plug? It's on the property. Like what's the shiloh? I know that min aliyah mutter b'bayis. Everyone agrees that someone makes a neder, asking himself of entering the upper story, the attic, is allowed to enter the bias, meaning the ground floor, because the term upper story is never used for the ground floor. You talk about you can't go into the attic. That's the attic. That's not the main level. Now we're talking about beds. Mishnah Hey. I know them and Amita Mutta Bidargash. Someone who makes a neder answering himself using a bed is allowed to use a dargash. Dargash is a small bed that's placed next to a regular bed. So it's like a footstool to help people climb on up and off the larger bed. Meir, this is according to Meir. The Chacham say dargash b'chal mita. Dargash is included in the word bed, and it's also forbidden. Hanoder min hadargash mutter b'mita. However, everyone agrees that someone who makes a neder answering himself from using a dargash is permitted to use a regular bed because the word dargash is never used for a regular bed. Hanoder min ha'ir mutter the kanes the chumash l'ir. Someone who makes a neder, answering himself entering a town, is permitted to enter the town's tchum, which is within 2,000 amos of the town. Also, the khan is the bura, but he's usher to enter the town's extensions. So when people say the town, they refer to the town and its extension, but not to its tchum. But now, but now, the neder on a house is different from the neder on a town. If someone who makes a neder asking himself from entering a house is usher only to enter the door frame and inward. He may set foot on the threshold up to the door frame, but even though the threshold can surely be considered as an extension of the house, it's not included in the neder. But that doesn't apply to the actual town where the extension is usher, but the actual town is mutter. Mishnah Vav. Konem peiros ha'elu alai. If a person who had fruits in front of him said that these fruits are konem upon me, konem hein al pi, or they are konem upon my mouth, konem hein lefi, or they are konem to my mouth, asa b'chilufeyim, he is also to have benefit from the exchanges. For example, if he sells the fruits, the money from the sale is us to him, and from the growth, whatever grows from the fruit, however, if he said that these fruits are konem upon me in regard to my eating or in regard to my tasting, he is allowed to eat or taste their exchanges and their growth. By specifying in regard to my eating, he applied the isser only to the fruits themselves and not to what results from them. The darvish is zarukala. The growths are permitted only if the neder was made regarding produce or seed. When planted, it decomposes in the ground before the new plant grows, as is the case with fruit and most vegetables. But if the neder is made regarding produce whose seed does not decompose, such as onions and garlic, gidulin asurin, then even the growths of the growths are asur. The third generation of fruit that grew from the produce that itself grew from the original produce. Since the seed of the original produce is not decomposed in the ground, part of the original produce is present in all future growths. Therefore, that would be included. Mishnah Zayim. Someone says to his wife, the work of your hands be what you you should prepare for me is konim upon me, konim api, or they're konim upon my mouth, konim him the fee, or they're konim to my mouth, asa b'chilufeim u'v'gedulehem. He is usher to benefit from their exchanges and from their growth. She'eni ochel, she'eni tach. However, if he said to her, the work of your hands is konim upon me, so I will not eat it, or so I will not taste it. He is mutter to have benefit from their exchanges and their growth. By specifying that I will not eat or I will not taste, he applied the Isser only to the actual food that she makes and not to what results from the food. The Darish Zaro Kale, the growths are mutter only if the neder is made regarding produce whose seed decomposes when planted. But if his neder was made regarding produce whose seed did not decompose, I feel gidule asura. Even the growths of the growths are asur. Mishnah Ches, 2 more to go. Ches and Tes. Sha'at os Eini ochel ad Pesach. Someone says to his wife, "What you make is asur to me. I will not eat it until Pesach." Sha'at osa eini miskasa ad Pesach. Or what you make is asur to me. I will not wear it until Pesach. Asa salid neha Pesach, and she made food or clothing before Pesach. Mutter le'echel iskasos acher Pesach. He is mutter to eat that food or wear that clothing after Pesach. Since he said, "I will not eat or wear it until Pesach," he may eat or wear after Pesach, even what she made before Pesach. Sha'at osa ad Pesach ein ochel. However, if you say what you make until Pesach is asur to me, I will not eat it. Or what you make until Pesach is forbidden to me, I will not wear it. And then she made food or clothing before Pesach. He is asur to eat that food or wear that clothing even after Pesach, since he did not limit the length of the Isser. Whatever she makes before Pesach is asur to him forever. Mishnah Test. Then is the other Pesach. If someone says to his wife between Sukkot and Pesach, that which you benefit from me until Pesach is forbidden to you. If you go to your father's house anytime from now until Sukkot of next year, and the halacha is halacha lifnei Pesach. If she went to her father's house before Pesach, thereby putting the neder into effect, asura b'hana'aso ad Pesach. She is asur to benefit from him until Pesach, which is when the period of prohibition ends. Achar Pesach. If she went after Pesach but before the next Sukkot, below Yachal Devaro, she is in violation of the Raisa of he shall not desecrate the word, meaning that although she disobeyed the condition after Pesach, when the period of the Isser ended, she caused the Isser to go into effect retroactively. Therefore, if she had received any benefit from her husband before Pesach, she was over the Isser not to desecrate a neder. And finally, if he says to his wife before Pesach, that which you benefit from me until Sukkot of next year is also to you. If you go to your father's house from now to Pesach of this year, and she went to her father's house before Pesach, thus putting the neder into effect. She is usher to benefit from him until Sukkot. However, she is allowed to go to her father's house after Pesach, even if she had benefited from her husband before Pesach. She may visit her father's house after Pesach, since doing so does not make the neder go into effect. That's all for today. We'll see you tomorrow for Perek. Have a wonderful day. Kol Tov.